The archives of the Valoran Dominion are the most complete in the known galaxy. They chronicle the rise and fall of 1,000 species, the birth of stars, and the science behind weapons that can turn suns to dust. We, the Valoran, have stared down armadas that blotted out entire constellations. We've pacified warrior races who live only for the glory of combat. We're a people of logic, of overwhelming force. We are supremely confident in our superiority, both technological and biological. We are an empire that can shatter worlds, and yet today, in this very chamber, our most decorated military leaders and wisest psionic analysts are gathered to debate total, species-wide surrender. Not to another empire, not to a coalition, not to some newly discovered cosmic horror, but to a single, backwater planet some 200,000 light years from our home. A planet they call Earth. The source of this existential dread isn't a galactic armada or a new superweapon. It's the battlefield data of a single-foot soldier whose actions have forced us to question everything we thought we knew about life and war. I am Admiral Vorath. For the past 3 cycles, my task has been to analyze this anomaly. When we first found the species calling themselves humans, the assessment was simple. They were young, having achieved FTL travel just 40 years ago, with a tiny colonial footprint on the 4th planet of their system. Their tech, while surprisingly rugged, was generations behind ours. Their biology was fragile, soft-skinned, dependent on a sliver of atmospheric conditions, with no natural weapons or armor to speak of. By every Dominion metric, they were a species ripe for swift, efficient assimilation. I recall Council member Crix dismissing the intelligence reports as a routine matter for a single legion. He isn't so dismissive now. None of us are. Because the initial scans failed to show us the one terrifying truth now laid bare by one soldier's combat logs. The truth that a species' greatest danger isn't its technology, but its philosophy. Our first contact wasn't diplomatic. It was kinetic. A standard Dominion patrol, charting the sector, ran into a small human scout ship, the UE-7 Pathfinder. Protocol is clear. We hailed them, demanding their surrender and the location of their homeworld. Their response was not what we expected. It wasn't a plea for mercy. It wasn't a declaration of war. Our linguists identified it as a string of defiant, untranslatable profanities, followed by a maneuver our combat simulators are still trying to process. The Pathfinder, a ship a tenth the size of our lead cruiser, turned into our weapons fire and rammed the cruiser's main engine. It was suicidal. It was illogical. And it was devastatingly effective. This one act forced a deeper look. We sent a covert recon team to an outlying colony, a miserable rock they called Firebase Alpha. It was there we captured the data that led to today's emergency council. The data of a single human soldier, designation unknown. Our analysts just call him Subject Zero. We didn't engage. We just watched. Firebase Alpha was besieged by a local predator, the skittious silicon-based insectoid swarm that the Dominion itself had deemed too costly to wipe out. Our own war councils figured that pacifying the skish would take 3 legions and a 22% casualty rate. The human garrison at Firebase Alpha had 32 soldiers. Our models said they should have been overrun in a single rotation. They weren't. They held for 17 rotations. And it was mostly because of Subject Zero. He wasn't a commander. He wasn't an officer. He was just a grunt, armed with what we'd consider primitive guns and basic armor. But what he did with those tools, it breaks our understanding of war. I'll show you 3 logs from the siege. Each one is an anomaly. Together, they paint a picture of a species so alien in their thinking that they're an existential threat to our entire way of life. Battlefield Log 1, the scavenged fabricator incident on the 3rd rotation. The skish breached the western perimeter. Dominion doctrine here is clear. You make a tactical retreat to a more defensible spot. You preserve the warrior for the next fight. Casualties are calculated, losses are accepted, and the battle goes on. Subject Zero did not retreat. We watched his position get overrun, his ammo run dry. We marked him KIA and moved on. About 30 human minutes later, psionic energy flared from that same spot. Not skish energy. Something manufactured. Our sensors zoomed in and found Subject Zero standing on a pile of twitching skish bodies, holding a weapon that shouldn't exist. Our analysts have been taking this apart for weeks. He'd taken the energy cell from a dead comrade's armor, the focusing lens from his own broken scope, and the crystalline nerve cluster of a Skish warrior he'd just killed. He then slapped them together, using nothing but loose wiring and a pipe from a collapsed barracks to create a directed energy weapon. It was crude, sure, with a catastrophic failure rate, but it worked. In the middle of a battle, he had invented a new weapon from scrap parts and alien guts. Council member Crix, your engineering course said this kind of field improvisation was impossible. They said it would take a full lab and a team of specialists. They were wrong. The human did it alone, while under fire. That isn't the logic of a soldier. It's the logic of a weed. Something that adapts to any environment, that turns the poison you use against it into food. How do you fight an enemy who sees a battlefield not as a graveyard, but as a box of parts? Battlefield Log 2, the Illogical Sacrifice. On the 9th rotation, a Skish tunneler collapsed a trench, trapping another soldier under ferrocrete rubble. The soldier's vitals were fading. His position was lost. The logical choice, the only choice a Dominion Centurion would make, is to leave him. You sacrifice one life to secure the line. That's the foundation of our military strategy. Subject Zero again defied all predictions. He left his tactically superior high ground, exposing himself to enemy fire from 3 sides, and ran toward the trapped man. He spent the next 7 minutes an eternity in a firefight digging his comrade out with his bare hands. During that time, our analysis showed his survival probability dipped below 4%. He was hit twice by Skish projectiles, wounds that would have dropped a Dominion warrior. He didn't even slow down. He freed his comrade, dragged him back to the line, and only then did he collapse from his own injuries. Our psionics were baffled. They couldn't find any logic in the action. It wasn't to save a high-value asset. The other soldier was the same low rank. There was no strategic gain. The only explanation they could offer was a concept so alien to us, they struggled for a word. They called it camaraderie, an illogical, emotional bond that makes someone risk total self-destruction for another for no discernible reward. We built our empire on individual strength, on survival of the fittest. The humans, it seems, built their civilization on mutual, reckless, illogical self-sacrifice. How do you break an army that's willing to die for the person next to them? Battlefield Log 3, the paradox of mercy. This final log is maybe the most unsettling. On the 16th rotation, the Skish swarm broke. Their queen was dead, killed by a different human who strapped a dozen explosives to her own body, and the drones were skittering back to their tunnels in chaos. The battle was over. We watched Subject Zero, his armor in tatters, limp across the battlefield. He walked up to a wounded Skish drone, its legs shattered. A Dominion warrior would have ended it. A clean, efficient kill. It's logical. It's necessary. Subject Zero raised his weapon, and then lowered it. He just looked at the creature for a long moment. Our psionic analysts reported a storm of emotions from him: rage, grief, exhaustion, and something else we couldn't name. He then knelt, took a pouch from his belt, and poured the last of his water onto the ground near the dying drone's mouth. An act of mercy for an enemy that had just spent 17 rotations trying to tear him apart. Then he turned and walked away. This one single, pointless act has cost me more sleep than any other. It's the action of a being whose motives are utterly, terrifyingly impossible to grasp. He can create a weapon from his enemy's corpse, brave certain death for a friend, and show compassion to a dying foe, all in the same fight. Brutality and mercy, logic and emotion, all twisted into one unpredictable package. We have spent centuries building predictive models for every species. We know how a Kaha will react when cornered. We know how a Silosian fleet will break. We know nothing about humans, because they don't seem to react at all. They choose. And we can't find a pattern in their choices. We're an empire built on predictable outcomes, and we've just met a species that thrives on the unpredictable. What happens when a force of order clashes with a force of pure chaos? It's a question that should keep all of us up at night. If you find yourself fascinated by these grand cosmic puzzles, consider subscribing to the channel for more dives into the unknown. And that brings me to the heart of my report. For the last cycle, our analysts tried to answer one question from High Commander Drix himself: what's the projected kill ratio of a single human soldier versus a standard Dominion Legion? For weeks, our combat simulators ran. And for weeks, they returned the same result: error. Insufficient data. Parameters exceed known variables. At first, we thought the simulators were broken. They're not. The error happens when the simulation tries to factor in the human mindset. The problem isn't Subject Zero's strength or his tech. The problem is that Subject Zero is a mirror of his entire species. A species that has spent its history not fighting other races, but fighting itself. Our deep archive probes brought back Earth's history. It's a litany of horrors. They've waged wars on a scale that would make a Dominion Centurion sick. They developed and used weapons of such breathtaking cruelty they defy the imagination. They split the atom and immediately used it to vaporize 2 of their own cities. They engineered plagues that could kill their entire population. They built arsenals big enough to sterilize their planet 100 times over, and that is the key. That is the truth that brings us here today. Any other species that found such power would have used it. To conquer, to destroy, to guarantee their own dominance. The humans built weapons that could end their existence. And then they chose not to use them. They signed treaties. They built deterrents. They pulled back from the edge of self-annihilation, not from fear, but from something far scarier, a search for a worthy opponent. For thousands of years, they've been fighting the most dangerous creature in the galaxy themselves, and they've won. They've honed their capacity for violence to a razor's edge and then learned to hold it back. They are a species of apex predators who have mastered restraint.so. What's the kill ratio for one human soldier? The question is wrong. It's like asking for the kill ratio of a plague. The answer isn't a number. It's a condition. 1 soldier is an anomaly. 2 are a threat. 1,000. 1,000 is an extinction level event. Not for what they will do, but for what they can do. If they can turn scrap into energy weapons, if they'll run into certain death for each other. If their history is one of perfecting violence and then choosing peace. What happens when they meet a galaxy-spanning empire and decide to let go? What happens when they finally meet an enemy they consider worthy? The data from Subject Zero doesn't show a soldier. It shows us a walking paradox. A creature forged in a world so hostile, it became the most dangerous thing in it. They are a species that sees impossible odds not as a warning, but as a challenge. So my recommendation to this council isn't war. It isn't subjugation. It is absolute, total avoidance. Erase the data on Sector 734. Delete the star charts. Classify Earth as a galactic hazard, a quarantine zone from which no signal is ever sent, and from which no ship must ever return. We have shattered worlds. We have turned suns to dust. But we have only ever fought for territory, for resources, for glory. We are not ready to fight a species that would go to war for the simple, terrifying, and utterly alien concept of winning. Because they've been doing it their whole lives. A war with the Dominion wouldn't be their first, but I am certain it would be our last. We must pray they never find us, and we must pray they're happy with the galaxy they have, because I don't believe for a second we could survive them wanting ours.